Listeners, beware. This podcast contains themes of the macabre and does not shy away from the details. Our content is graphic and our language is colorful. We might not be your cup of tea, so listener discretion is strongly advised. You have tuned in to The Killer Tea, a podcast hosted by two best friends with a proclivity to decipher the deeply demented minds of murderers.
Welcome to episode 9 of The Killer Tea, where we'll be discussing the real-life Buffalo Bill, Gary HEIDNIK.
We are your hosts, Christina
And Chelsea.
and for the next hour, we will be the purveyors of
The
really
bullshit.
fucked up, gross, disgusting serial killer dickhead shit.
Yeah, I feel like we might need an extra trigger warning for this douche canoe.
All right, y'all. Trigger warning. Trigger warning. If you cannot handle necrophilia, sodomy,
Rape, assault,
dis-
torture,
dismemberment, lots of things.
cannibalism.
Yes.
This is probably not the episode for you.
This is the dark one. Faux show. We took a break from the really super dark ones for a hot second.
Think like David Parker Ray
Slash,
on steroids.
yes.
I didn't think that we would have another one that grossed me out as much
Is David Parker
as
Ray?
David Parker Ray,
Yeah.
but this one definitely does.
He gives Ed Gein a run for his money.
Well, I mean, this dude and Ed Gein are literally the inspiration for Buffalo Bill in
The
Silence
real
of the Lambs.
life of Buffalo Bill, y'all. The real life
The
Buffalo
two
Bill.
of them combined in their horribleness.
As if the work of fiction wasn't scary enough, it actually happened.
Yeah.
It actually fucking happened. All right.
All right, well, let's get into it.
Let's get in
Let's just fucking do it.
to this barrel of monkey bullshit.
This week, we are covering our hometown killer.
Hometown killer. So, slight disclaimer, he was born and raised in Eastlake, Ohio, and lived there literally well into his adulthood, but his crimes were committed in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Or Philadelphia.
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
While he didn't actually commit the murders in Ohio, he was born and raised in Ohio, and we say that counts.
We done fucked him up here in Ohio, so.
Yeah.
And then we sent him off to the rest of the world.
Lovely.
Gary HEIDNIK was born November 22nd, 1943, to Michael and Ellen HEIDNIK, and was raised in Eastlake, which is a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio.
Real close to home.
Eastlake is really nice, by the way. It's nice.
Little background on Gary. So Gary's father, Michael, was actually a city councilman, put on this like really great front to the community, and you know, they looked like this really
Amazing nuclear family.
well-rounded, but Michael and Ellen were actually
known drunks. They were both.
Yeah.
They were both infamous in the neighborhood and their local community for
being raging alcoholics.
being raging alcoholics who often fought, and their marriage didn't really last all that long. They ended up divorcing in 1946, where then the two sons,
Gary and Terry.
another one. The last one that we
know.
did was Larry and Jerry.
So now we have Gary and Terry.
Which is,
And
wow,
They
weird.
they ended up staying with their mother for about 4 years after the divorce, but eventually were sent to live with their father.
Because their mom, it didn't really say what kind of instability she had, whether it was financial or mental, or if she was abusive. It just said she was unstable.
Here's a theory
Oh, okay.
that I encountered while researching Mr. HEIDNIK.
Okay. Go on.
So, at the age of 6, Gary fell from a tree And I heard that he fell up to 25 feet. Like, it was a big fall. Like, it was a big fall. And suffered a severe brain injury. This actually changed his personality, as well as literally changed the physical shape of his head as well. Like, that's how severe this was. It actually changed the shape of his skull. So my theory is that his mom just couldn't deal with his behavior after this happened.
I was reading this book, and the author, Ken Englade, I'm not sure how to say his name. It was called The Cellar of Horror. He would claim that he never actually fell out of the tree, but I found that claim to be unsubstantiated because I couldn't find anything else to disprove the claim that he did fall out of the tree. And his head did look slightly deformed.
Slightly? Did you see that, dude?
Okay, so he was actually teased in school and called football head because of his...
Hey, Arnold.
Yeah, of how his brain, well, not his brain, how his head shape kind of was shaped like a football. But his father was super abusive.
Yeah.
He once hung him by his feet out of a 3rd-story window. And when he would wet the bed, which is something that he did throughout his life, he was a frequent bedwetter, his father would resort to humiliating him by taking the soiled bed sheets and hanging them out the window for the neighbors to see.
So, child raising 101.
Don't
If
humiliate
your
your children.
child wets the bed, beating them with their toys, which is something his father often did, and humiliating them is not really the best way to help your child overcome the bedwetting.
Shame and humiliation was kind of a tactic of his dad. One time with both the boys, he painted a bullseye on the butt of their jeans, like literally where the butthole is, and made them go to school like that. What is the purpose of that? This is how you make a serial killer.
This, ladies and gentlemen, serial killer making 101. If you're interested in your child becoming a serial killer, do these following things.
My God. Well, anyways, so whether or not you believe that he fell out of the tree, like I said, I found the claim to be somewhat unsubstantiated.
Maybe his father dropped him from the balcony.
Oh my God.
And they just said it was a tree.
Oh my God.
I mean, that's just a theory. That's not
That's
substantiated by any facts.
Well, regardless, it said that his personality changed after this fall, like Chelsea mentioned, and he went from being very kind and gentle towards animals to being a torturer and killer of small animals.
Well, like we have said, if you have massive brain trauma, it can literally change your entire personality. It's a fact. It's that it can happen.
HEIDNIK was obsessed with all things military and financial, which I thought was really intriguing. When other kids would read the Sunday comics, he was actually the kid. Well, I mean, not even the kid, as if to say there's a group of children who do this. He was a child who would read the financial section of the newspaper instead of like the comics.
Hey, man, he was really good with finances.
I guess he was really good with finance.
That served him really well later on.
But he also was obsessed with the military, and he would go around wearing military outfits and fatigues around the house. This was like well into his teenage years that he was doing it. So military was definitely a thing for him.
So much so that he actually dropped out of public high school in the 9th grade and joined the Staunton Military Academy.
Which his father actually, it wasn't as if he dropped out of public school because he wasn't doing well. No, he was actually doing very, very well.
And his father wanted to go to the military
his father
academy.
scrounged up some money together to be able to pay for him to go to this military school. But during this time, and there's not really any information how or why or how it ended up working out, but he went to go see his first psychiatrist while he was at this military school, and he was never put on any medication or we don't even know what prompted the visit, but he eventually did drop out of that military school. I think that was like a live-in school.
It was. So he ended up moving back home, but he didn't stay there very long. He actually ended up joining the Army as a medic.
Yeah, because he dropped out of public school yet again. And supposedly his stepmother hated him, and it was not a good home environment, supposedly.
Yeah.
So he joined the U.S. Army when he was 17 years old, and we have yet another example of a serial killer doing well in the military.
I forgot to tell you about this.
Oh.
I asked my lovely husband his thoughts on this.
Yes, and for
And
reference,
why my husband was in the military for 8 years. And I asked him why he thought serial killers flourish in the military. And not flourish in like a they become killers. Flourish as in that's probably their most normal time.
yes, and they don't act like killers.
Yes. And he said that you are just too goddamn busy in the military to be worrying about becoming a serial killer.
That's interesting. That's a good point, that maybe idle hands are the worst thing for.
Yeah, I mean, he said there is so much control and structure, and you're very rarely having any downtime, that there probably just is so much rigidity to their life at that point that they just those urges are really under control.
I think that is a very astute observation.
Yeah, so kudos to my husband for making that observation.
Well done, sir.
And I mean, I didn't look into it
But
research wise. It was just his opinion, and
sounds good.
I thought it sounded really good.
There's some confirmation bias for you. Sounds good. Must be true.
sounds like it must be true.
So Heidnik excelled in the military. His boot camp guy, whatever his
Drill sergeant.
that guy, the guy who did the thing and yelled stuff. He said he did excellent. Interessante, but he actually wanted to go on to be part of the military police. However, he was 18 years old, and you had to be 19 in order to be part of the military police. So he actually got rejected for that.
So he ends up being a medic instead.
Yeah, which is great because he does really well at being a medic.
Yeah, he really does. It
all works out.
Unfortunately, though, he is honorably discharged in only 14 months of service. And he is claimed to have a medical disability as schizoid personality disorder.
So I want to pause because in reading that book, I found some interesting little facts, little tidbits.
Oh, please
about him.
Share.
He was a loan shark while he was in the military before he got to Germany, because he ended up going to Germany.
Interesting.
What he would do is he would hoard his money, and then he would loan that money out to other soldiers with interest. He was actually making more money than he ever had while he was in the military, being a little like loan shark, which, by the way, the military was like, nay, you're not allowed to do that. And while he didn't get punished, they sent him to Germany, and when they sent him over there, he was not able to collect on the loans that he put out, so he was out like $5,000 and shitting his pants.
Yeah.
Because $5,000 back in the 50s or 60s, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. I'm torn on that, on if he actually had schizoid personality disorder.
Yeah.
There's some stuff that kind of comes into play later that makes me think there may be something there.
Well, while he's in Germany serving, he only a few weeks after being there, he earns his GED. He was in the military a total of 14 months, like you had mentioned. His official diagnosis was the schizoid personality disorder. And this all came about because he was in Germany and he started complaining about severe headaches, dizziness, blurred vision, and nausea. So the hospital neurologist diagnosed him with the gastroenteritis.
Gastroenteritis?
Yeah, that thing. And while he was undergoing treatment for that, the neurologist started noticing that he had tics, that he would jolt his head horizontally. That made him like pay closer attention to other things, which is how he ended up coming up to the idea that he may have been schizoid. And again, around that time period, that was frequently diagnosed.
Yeah, that was a pretty common diagnosis at that point.
But he was given antipsychotics.
This also gets him shipped back to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, because he can't be in Germany with this. And so he's put in a military hospital in the States, but eventually is discharged with full disability pension because of it.
Wow, this motherfucker got paid disability. But it's not like anybody knew what was about to come, because what was about to come just came out of fucking nowhere.
Yeah.
Or at least, unless something happened over there in Germany that ain't nobody want to talk about, because it really does seem like this shit just came out of fucking nowhere with him.
Yeah. Yeah. So he gets out of the army.
He returns to Ohio for a while.
Yeah. He actually works as an LPN for a
Licensed
little while.
practical nurse.
Yeah. And does really well at it. I mean, he is intelligent. He does know what's going on in the medical field. He excels at being a medic. But he's having a hard time finding steady work and kind of keeping a job. So he does eventually end up moving back to Pennsylvania. During this time, his mental disorders get worse, but
he was able to function somewhat normally between psychotic episodes. At least that's what the people around him would just kind of describe it as, that, you know, he may have been a little batshit, but like he was able to be a normal person most of the time.
Right.
I think something that's interesting about him is that they actually tested his IQ, and he has what is accepted to be a genius level IQ.
Yeah.
Even though he dropped out of school repeatedly.
He does have a very high IQ.
This is going to play a huge role in the rest of his life, because he uses this genius IQ to start a church.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough.
Well, there is something that happens before he starts this church. So in the 1970s, his mother is actually diagnosed with bone cancer, and she ends up committing suicide because of this. She poisons herself.
Yeah,
to kill herself.
She used the stuff that was used to treat gonorrhea, I think, or syphilis maybe. Yeah, it might have been syphilis, but yeah, she poisons herself. However, this whole mental illness seems to run in his family. So Gary himself has no less than 13 bouts of trying to commit suicide. And then his brother as well is in and out of a psychiatric hospital. His brother also tries to kill himself.
Multiple suicide attempts. Yeah. This is interesting that this mental illness is running in his family, and it is giving them suicidal tendencies, and they're all kind of suffering from these suicidal tendencies. Definitely makes me think there's something going on there. Genetic going on there.
But Gary did try to have a normal life after his mom passed away. Like you said, he became a licensed practical nurse. He enrolled in classes at the University of Pennsylvania, but again, dropped out, that genius level IQ, but school just doesn't seem to be the thing for him. He did successfully become a psychiatric nurse, ironically, at a Veterans Administration. But then once again, he was fired because of his poor attendance and for being rude to patients. Yeah. This guy can't hold a job and he can't stay in school, but he's a fucking genius.
So in 1971, he decides to start his own church. And this church is called the United Church of the Ministries of God.
Before we go too far with this, his version becomes like a cult.
Oh, yeah.
But this church is actually a normal church.
Right.
Like the parish that has continued on beyond him is normal. They're not cult like. Him and his small little fellowship
was cult like. This is kind of where my schizoid I have trouble with, because in the research that I was doing, he would tell his followers that he had been spoken to by God, and that is why he decided to start this church, and that he needed to create more children. God had directed him to have babies with multiple women, and whether or not he was hallucinating this or it was part of his like scam.
I think it was part of a scam.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to know which version.
Well, this is why I think that. The members, his parish of the church, were actually, he started with 5 members of the parish, and it grew to a fellowship of over 50, and he made a $1,500 investment in the church and was actually able to raise that to over $500,000, which adjusted for inflation is over $1 million.
Well, what he was doing is he was investing his disability checks from the military.
Oh, okay.
That actually comes back to bite him in the ass much later on while he's in trial.
Oh, I never heard that.
Yep, because he was running the church, and he was getting offerings and things like that through the church, and was using the church like as a tax exemption. So he was avoiding taxes that way. But he was also, as we talked about when he was a kid, he was very into finances, and he was a very savvy investor, and he would invest these military disability checks and managed to grow this account to over $500,000.
Okay. The members of his parish were all patients of the Elwyn Institute for the, and I'm sorry, this is not the accepted vernacular now, but this is what it was called at the time, the Elwyn Institute for the Retarded. They all had learning disabilities and mental disabilities. This started a theme for him. They became easy prey because they tended to be illiterate or just too trusting. And because he was a prominent member of their community, they trusted him.
This is actually where some of those quote unquote hallucinations or delusions start to come into play as well. He tells his followers that he needs to have all these babies, right? And this actually leads to him becoming involved with Anjanette Davidson, who is both illiterate and mentally disabled. She is mentally handicapped. She really can't make good, sound decisions for herself. Heidnik actually gets her pregnant, and they have a daughter together named Maxine. But unfortunately, because Anjanette can't really take good care of herself, the state actually takes Maxine. And this really pisses Heidnik off because, you know, in his mind, God's telling him to have all these babies, and the state keeps taking his children because, you know, he's not claiming responsibility for them, and their mothers can't take care of them.
Don't have the faculties to do that.
No, and I believe he actually ended up having 2 children this way.
In the community around Gary, he was flashy. He had a Rolls Royce and a Cadillac, and he would flash wads of money.
Because God told him.
Yeah.
That he wanted him to have all of these things.
But he did spend it on children and members of the Elwyn Institute, and nobody around him actually had anything bad to say. He was considered very caring, well-adjusted, and a spiritual man. So you can see, like...
It's almost like Gacy. You know,
yes,
how
it
like
is a lot like Gacy
had this public persona where he was really giving and really charitable and really helped out in his community, but was a real fucked up individual.
This is where it's like the ball drops. Well, okay, sure, he was a loan shark and maybe a bit skeezy with money. Suddenly, out of fucking nowhere, we don't have a lifelong thing of sexual assault. We don't have any violent crimes, none of that shit. But on March 16th, in 1978, very, very, very shortly after his daughter's birth, Gary signed out Anjanette's sister, Alberta, who was mentally disabled, on a day leave from that same Elwyn Institute, the one that most of his people from his parish are from. He took her home, and then he kept Alberta prisoner, locked in a storage container in his basement. When she was found, and by the way, his wife or girlfriend, they were not married, are they?
No, they weren't married. His girlfriend
she
knew.
She was his partner. Anjanette knew, but she didn't have the faculties to, like, do anything about it.
No, and this poor girl had, I believe she was 24 at the time.
She was raped, sodomized. She had contracted gonorrhea.
But you have to think, like, she had been in the Elwyn Institute since she was 14. So she had no idea how to deal with anything that was being done to her. So when the cops finally did come and find her, she was terrified, hiding in his basement, didn't know what was going on. But when they do get her back, they find evidence that all of this horrible shit had been done to her.
So Gary was arrested and charged and convicted with kidnapping, rape, unlawful restraint, false imprisonment, involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, and interfering with the custody of a committed person. For that, he spent 4 years in prison.
I wish it was even that good. He was found guilty and he was sentenced to 3 to 7 years. But the original sentence was overturned on an appeal, and he actually spent 3 years of his incarceration in a mental institution, not prison.
See, I had read that he was in, all it had said for me was that he was imprisoned for 4 years, and he spent most of that time with his head down and did not make a peep.
Nope. He spent 3 of those years in a mental institution and was released in April of 1983 under state. Words are hard.
Words are hard.
He was released in April of 1983 under a state-sanctioned mental health program, which kind of had him under supervision for a little bit.
Well, right after his release, he bought a side-by-side duplex. I could give you the address, but there's not really a point. But it was in North Philadelphia. He was back to his previous flashy behavior, like showing off his expensive cars and the wads of cash. And believe it or not, the church was still doing well despite that whole scandal. And there was this unsubstantiated rumor that he may have been receiving fraudulent disability payouts for claiming to be mentally disabled himself.
Yeah, but I mean, he was getting the disability checks from the military, so it probably wouldn't have been that hard for him to, pass off disability, in the civilian world either. But this is where it gets even more jacked up. So instead of just
learning from his fucking
mistakes and going out and trying to be a normal member of society, he goes ahead and uses a matrimonial service to find himself a wife,
aka mail order bride. He connected with 20-year-old Betty Disto. The two embarked on a long distance relationship, and they wrote letters over a period of 2 years. And then Betty finally moved from the Philippines to the United States in September 1985. And the two were married just a month later on October 3rd. But a little bit about this is when you immigrate, because my husband is an immigrant, when you immigrate to the United States, you only have 90 days to get married. So the fact that they got married 30 days is irrelevant. They would have had to get married a month, 2 months to 3 months. Yeah. They have to get married immediately.
I read something interesting about him. That he specifically chose a wife from a quote-unquote Asian culture because they tend to be more submissive and willing to do their husband's bidding because that's part of their culture.
Interesting.
And so he specifically chose a Filipino wife to try to achieve that goal.
Well, he didn't necessarily get what he thought he was getting. So the marriage was over by January 1986 after Betty discovered Gary in bed with 3 other women and then forced her to partake in a foursome.
Well, at that point, it would have been a 5-some.
Yeah, 5-some. And basically an orgy. So he forced her to participate and then forced her to watch as he had sex with other women. And he beat her, he raped her and assaulted her, but she was able to escape, and the local immigrant community supported her and was able to get her away from him.
Yeah, she actually started talking to members of the local Filipino community, and they basically just told her, no, this is not right. This is not how it's supposed to be. And they helped her escape. So she left and went back to the Philippines and filed for divorce. And she also ended up filing for child support because while he was beating and raping her, he managed to get her pregnant.
So she reached out to him in 1987 for child support, and he was actually charged with assault, indecent assault, spousal rape, God, I can't talk either, and involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, but was never convicted because Betty didn't show up to court to testify against him.
Well, she had gone back to the Philippines, so I'm not surprised she had avoided court.
Crazy enough, the parole period for his previous heinous crimes had ended the day before the cops showed up to confront him with all the allegations from Betty.
Of course they did. How do these serial
How do
killers
these
get this
things
lucky?
happen?
Like, how do they get this fucking lucky, man? Well, I mean, Gacy was on fucking parole when he was still picking up kids.
It's crazy to me. So on Thanksgiving Day in 1986, Gary is furious over the whole Betty situation, and he was in search of a sex worker to take his frustrations out on. That's when he came across 25-year-old Josefina Rivera, who ends up playing a really pivotal role in everything.
Before this, can we back up one tiny little skosh?
Oh, yes, we can. Back it up.
He's actually charged with aggravated assault and carrying an unlicensed pistol because he shot at a tenant of the house he had for rent, grazing his face. Mm-hmm. So this dude clearly has anger issues.
And he is still allowed to be involved in the fucking church. My God.
Yeah. So,
blows my mind.
Carrying on to Thanksgiving.
So Josefina is a mother of 3 small children. I think she had a 11-month-old, a 5-year-old, and I think one was like 6 weeks.
Oh my God.
Very small children. And they were poor. So she was out on the streets. I didn't see anything about her being a drug addict or anything like that. Not that it matters. But she was out on the streets trying to earn enough money through sex work to be able to feed her kids Thanksgiving dinner. That was what she was doing out there. She bumped into him. They ended up deciding to have consensual sex. And after they were finished and she was getting dressed, Gary actually attacked her from behind and started strangling her. She ended up agreeing to let him handcuff her and take her downstairs to save her life, essentially. Yeah. So after getting her to sit down on the dirty mattress downstairs in the basement, he actually laid his head on her lap once he subdued her and fell asleep. Just so bizarre.
I read that he put her in shackles, right? Mm-hmm. And then put super glue in the locks.
Oh, yeah, I think I heard something like that as well.
So she couldn't even try to pick the locks on her shackles.
Well, during that first day there, she waited until he was busy doing something else or had went where or something. He was gone. And she was able to get to a window that she was able to jar open just enough, and she started screaming, trying to get help. Nobody else heard her, but he heard her.
Gary heard her.
As you can imagine, shit got crazy from that point on.
Yeah, so he hears her screaming, and he decides that this can't be happening.
Yep.
So he digs a pit in his basement and throws her in the pit and covers it with plywood. Then what he does is he turns on the radio.
Heavy metal radio.
And starts blaring it so no one can hear her screaming. How did no one complain
about the loud music?
Keep in mind that the church is still going on, like in his home during this.
I don't know. Isn't it? So let me tell you, let's segue. Let's get off topic a little bit. Last year, Chelsea and I went to Boone.
Yes, we did.
Well, this is well before any serial killer podcast, before her and I had mutually discussed like really liking serial killers. That came, a little bit later. So we were in Boone, and as we're walking down the street in Boone, North Carolina, we see this little girl fighting to not be put into a car. And we both stopped what we were doing immediately and listened and watched to make sure that was actually the little girl's family member that was putting her into the car.
Yeah.
Because while some people may have perceived it as a hissy fit, the first thing Chelsea and I thought of was,
that seems weird.
It makes me wonder, how do people not take that pause when something is strange?
I think a lot of people just don't want to get involved in other people's personal business. And to me, that particular situation was weird because, like, when my son is throwing a fit, he usually screams mommy in that hissy fit. Mommy, no, I don't want to. Mommy, stop. Mommy, blah. Well, the little girl was just shrieking. Mm-hmm. And I think you and I both came to the conclusion that it was a family member. He had the car seats in the back of his car. Just at first, the way she was flailing, we kind of both went,
Mom mode activate.
Mom mode activated.
But we always joked too, like when our friends would want to go to downtown Charlotte to party for our birthdays and stuff, they would be like, yes, free drinks, when guys would hand them to them. And me and Chelsea are like, the fuck you doing?
You don't know him.
You don't know him.
You didn't see the bartender pull that drink out.
You don't accept free drinks from people. What the fuck is wrong with you? You want to die? And then other people are just like,
it's fine.
It's a free drink. No, bitch.
The only time I ever accepted a free drink is when the bartender was the one who handed it to me.
Yes, that I understand. But anyways, so
Segue.
yeah. Segue over, but that was just talking about our personal experience and why you should question everything.
So getting back to Gary.
By January in 1987, he had abducted 4 other women.
So he's up to a total of 5 women living in his basement.
Sandra Lindsay was kidnapped on December 3rd, and while she was mentally disabled, she had met Gary through Elwyn. I don't know if she was a member of his parish, but she was at that Elwyn Institute that he frequented. Then Lindsay Thomas was kidnapped 2 days before Christmas.
Lisa Thomas.
Oh, I'm sorry, Lisa Thomas. She's not a sex worker, nor was she mentally handicapped, but he had flirted with her and enticed her with an offer of taking her out to dinner and buying her a nice outfit. And she ended up at his house for a glass of wine, but then ended up in his basement.
Yeah, he would kidnap these women and then throw them in the pit in his basement.
Yes.
So after Lisa Thomas comes Deborah Dudley. She was kidnapped on January 2nd, and she was also mentally disabled, but she was super feisty and really fought back against Gary.
Yeah, she didn't give a fuck. She was not submissive in the slightest, and she fought the entire time that she was kept captive.
She would demand showers, tampons, and basically just basic needs of a human. And Gary was not a fan of this behavior, and he would beat the crap out of her and then beat the other girls whenever she would misbehave. And basically he was trying to pit the girls against each other.
Because in his mind, they would resent each other and then were less likely to rebel.
Yeah.
Which, to some degree, I worked. I mean...
It did work.
But it's this specific situation that turns everything for the worst, I think, because now his paranoia creeps in, because now that he's got multiple women and there's this theme of potentially being overpowered.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, he even adds another girl, Jacqueline Askins.
She was brought to the pit on January 8th. He then explained it, what you had talked about earlier, but now this time he's explaining it to his victims, that he wanted to get 10 women pregnant and start his own family since the state would not allow him to have children.
Right.
Sandra.
Yeah, Sandra.
She finally had enough, and she attempted to remove the plywood covering from the top of the pit. Gary caught her and then strung her up by her wrists on a pipe. And then he left her there for several days. And the girls started to worry because she became feverish and was vomiting. And Gary attributed this to like her potentially being pregnant. But he also thought that maybe she was faking and was just trying to get down.
Yeah. Well, eventually Sandra slipped into unconsciousness and Gary released her and her body fell limp to the ground. And it was only once he kicked her body into the pit that he realized that she had actually died.
Yeah, so then he took the body upstairs, and then that's when the women heard the sounds of an electric saw.
Yeah. Sandra Lindsay's official cause of death was from a combination of starvation, torture, and an untreated fever. Gary didn't know what to do with her body, so he took an electric saw and dismembered it. He saved her arms and legs in the freezer and
labeled them to be used as dog food.
And then, yeah.
The police would later find 24 pounds of human limbs that were stockpiled in the freezer. What the fuck?
It gets worse. Hang in there. He didn't really know what to do with her body, so he dismembered her and cut her up into pieces as small as he could. He then baked her ribs in the oven and boiled her head on the stove.
Which is reminiscent of the British serial killer that we already covered, Dennis Nielsen.
Because Deborah was such a pain in the ass, he actually brought her upstairs and made her look at Sandra's head boiling on the stove.
That's right. I forgot about that.
As a means to like dissuade her from causing him any more trouble in the future.
Ugh.
And this actually did work for a little bit.
Yeah.
She actually did sit down and shut her mouth not forever, but for a little bit.
So, like I said, the police were eventually called to the home due to the awful smell that was permeating the neighborhood. And this is like we talked about with Sowell, that smell, that putrid,
rotting human flesh.
So, but Gary was able to convince the police that the smell was due to him having fallen asleep and burning a roast.
Okay.
How?
These must have been some rookie cops.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure most cops know what the smell of burning
roast
flesh.
Doesn't even smell that bad.
No.
I don't know. As is typical of people suffering from untreated schizophrenia, Gary became increasingly paranoid. He believed that the women were conspiring against him, and his solution was, I hate this part.
So he believes these women are conspiring against him, and he can't keep them separate from each other. He's keeping them all in this same pit, right? His solution is he duct tapes their heads down, right? And then he takes,
we're both struggling with this part.
He takes screwdrivers and drives them into the women's ears to destroy their eardrums, because he believed
if they can't hear him,
they would not be able to hear him come and go, and they would not be able to hear each other. Therefore, they would also try not to escape. Now, I do want to segue here just a smidge, because Josephina, the smart girl and the first one he kidnapped, is going out of her way to please Gary. She is doing whatever he says. She is informing on the other girls. She is doing her best to please him. And because of this, she's actually given special treatment. So she is not forced to sleep in the pit. She's still forced to sleep in the basement, but she doesn't have to sleep in the pit. She also doesn't receive the beatings that the other girls do. And she does not have her eardrums perforated, because HEIDNIK believes that she is fully on his side. So much so that she's actually allowed out in the rest of the house and is actually allowed to run errands with him on the odd occasion that he goes out.
Part of this was she also sometimes had to inflict torture on the other girls, and it was at one point in time she was considered an accomplice of his, and that just wasn't true. She was clever, she was strategic, she was biding her time.
She was doing whatever she needed to do to survive.
And she knew that if she planned her own escape and just her got away, that Gary would kill the other girls.
Yeah.
So while she was doing these horrible things to the other girls to win his favor, there was an end goal, and it was not for nothing. Mm-hmm. I mean, the mental fortitude of this woman to be able to plan that far in advance and bide her time in order to ensure that the lives of the women were preserved. I mean, not many people could do that.
Yeah. Some of the things he would do to these women is he would fill the pit with water and make the chained women go into the water, and then he would use wires. He would take like an extension cord and expose the wires and he would electrocute the women through the water by throwing the live wire into the water. And he's quoted as saying that nothing was working. I was trying to find something that worked that would make them shut up and stop hollering.
Maybe don't fucking torture them.
I was trying to find something that would make them behave.
Deborah, the most defiant one, was fatally electrocuted during one of these torture sessions. He disposed of her body in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey.
And another side note that's interesting with this is when Deborah died, he actually wrote up a document and made Josephina sign that she had been party to her death and that she had helped him kill Deborah willingly.
As if that would
hold
up in court.
And then made one of the other girls sign it as a witness. So his thinking here is that if he makes Josephina sign that she had helped kill Deborah, that this would maybe prevent her from ever talking against him if she should ever escape.
I mean, that just goes to show how highly he thought of himself, that he actually believed that that would work and fly. Ugh. So on March 23rd, 1987, Josephina convinces him to let her leave so she can go visit her family, because what she's telling him is that she wants to be with him, that she's on board, and she just wants to be able to tell her family goodbye, because if this is going to work, they're like never going to be able to see each other again.
Right.
Her family, she means. So in return for him doing this for her, she agrees to go out and get a new girl, which is, yes, horrible, but this is her escape plan. That if she needs something worthwhile enough to leverage with him, and getting a new girl was going to be that thing. And Josephina's plan, while yes, she's going to bring a new girl in, the new girl isn't going to be there very long, and she had to choose the lesser of evils, and this was the only way that she saw that she could accomplish that goal and save the lives of all of the women involved and not just herself.
Right. She does help him abduct a new girl. Agnes Adams is who they get. And like we said, luckily for Adams, her time in Gary's home is super short-lived. After earning his trust and like showing that she was really in it to be with him, Gary drops her at a gas station and tells her that she has 15 minutes to visit her family or else. And she knows that if Gary isn't immediately arrested, he's going to go home and murder the other girls. But luckily, there's a patrol car nearby, and Josephina confesses everything that's going on, and the patrol car immediately responds, and they go to her call, and they go to Gary's house.
So, I mean, for once, it's so fortunate that one of these girls actually hit some luck, because had those police officers been probably anywhere else, who knows if this would have played out the way that it did. But luckily, it was very swift justice. So during his arraignment, Gary comes up with some crazy excuses. Like, he even tries to fucking claim that all the women were in the basement when I moved in.
As if that is a good enough reason to keep them there.
And how fucking, what in bizarro land does that sound like oh yeah, people are gonna empathize with that excuse? That's a perfectly good excuse. Okay. I digress.
Yeah.
So of course he goes after the insanity plea, which is quickly disproven by his financial advisor for that church, because it
was a Merrill Lynch financial advisor who testified. Merrill Lynch is a huge financial industry, and they work in investing. And so the investment advisor was brought to trial and actually was quoted as saying that HEIDNIK was an astute investor who knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah, he was very business savvy. And so that was the nail in the metaphorical coffin for him. So
yeah, he denied during his trial that any mistreatment of his captives happened, and actually claimed that the other captives had killed Sandra Lindsay because she was a lesbian.
He even tried to say that, well, I tried to make it comfortable for them at first, and I even threw them a Christmas and a New Year's party.
You were still keeping these women
Flaming piece
in a
of
hole
shit.
in your fucking basement.
Hello, you're still a piece of garbage. Well, so while he was incarcerated, Gary would try committing suicide twice, once by hanging and a second time by overdosing on his antipsychotics, but neither
worked. And here's the craziest part. In 1997, his daughter Maxine and his ex-wife Betty tried to file a state of execution to temporarily suspend the court judgment, saying that Gary was not competent enough to be executed.
I have a theory.
What?
It's totally unsubstantiated. I'm just wild guess here that like maybe he promised them money and that's why they would do that. And they wouldn't get it if he was dead.
I don't know.
Because why else? Why else would they do that? Maxine had nothing to do with him, and Betty loathed him.
Right?
Why else would they do it? He was a millionaire.
I don't know.
So if I had to wager, I would wager my unsubstantiated claim with no evidence whatsoever that he had promised them some sort of money and that's why they did it.
Could be. Well, it didn't work.
It didn't work.
Because after 2 years of legal proceedings, Gary was cleared for execution. And thank God, on July 6, 1999, he was executed via lethal injection.
So as we mentioned before, he was the real-life inspiration for the Buffalo Bill character from Silence of the Lambs.
And this was specifically because of the hole that he kept his captives in.
Yes. Some other notes and thoughts that I want to share is that he tortured with household appliances. He beat them with a shovel. He raped them daily. And then he did still kind of have a little bit of a cult following of supporters that throughout all of this stuff still believe that he was innocent.
Yeah.
Gary's father actually denied him ever abusing his son and said that aside from the divorce, Gary had a pretty normal childhood. And when he was arrested, his father said he deserves to be hung for what he did. And I mean, too right, sir.
I don't disagree.
HEIDNIK was never known to have any sort of relationship with his son. And a weird thing something I noted about his past as well was when he was a teenager, he actually had no problem dating girls. So I don't know where this weird thing came. I don't know.
I don't know. This is kind of where I semi-believe that maybe he really truly did have schizophrenia and was having these grand delusions. Yeah. Because if we look at what we talked about schizophrenia when we did Richard Chase,
the Vampire of Sacramento.
We did talk about how untreated schizophrenia can result in behavior that is incredibly abnormal, and that schizophrenia usually does start to arise in your early 20s. So he may have been a normal teenager having normal relationships, and when he joined the military, it just triggered the schizophrenia. Maybe going to Germany really was like the bomb that set it all off. Maybe that's truly what caused all of this, is maybe he really was having delusions and hallucinations that God was telling him to do all of these things. I mean, it seems like he really had a major personality change, and the fact that he had that massive head trauma as a kid could have also played into all of this. If you do a massive brain injury, topple it with schizophrenia, I mean, you're just asking
for a mess.
And he was treated on and off. Was he on medication when he was committing all of these crimes?
I almost doubt it. So he is often referred to as a serial killer, and we've referred to him as a serial killer, but technically
he's not.
Technically, he does not fit the FBI's classification of what a sequential serial murderer is, which is 3 consecutive murders back to back. And since he only committed 2, he technically does not fit the serial killer standard.
Right.
But he was a serial rapist, and for all we know, had those girls not escaped, they probably all would have died.
At some point, yeah. I mean, look at the way he was treating them.
Yeah, so he's still a serial killer in my mind.
So, the question is he worse than David Parker Ray?
Yes.
I agree.
He's definitely worse than David Parker Ray. David Parker Ray didn't have any confirmed... Well, he had one confirmed victim, or 2 confirmed victims.
One confirmed victim that wasn't even a woman.
Yeah, and he only assisted in the other one, which was his little minion committed.
Yeah.
Technically.
While David Parker Ray is considered a serial killer, I truly do not believe he is. I think that he sold most of the women that he kidnapped and raped into sex slavery since he was so close to the Mexican border. I believe he sold them into sex trafficking, and that's why they were never found. That's just my theory. Not to mention the fact that David Parker Ray himself has said that he avoided killing when possible.
If you could see pictures of this basement and this pit where these women were kept, like, there's no... David Parker Ray was disgusting and horrible, but at least that trailer, his toy box,
was clean.
There was light.
And he wasn't keeping them for months and months. He kept them for a couple days, did what he wanted. I mean, you can't make it better.
Yeah.
But there are just these very small, subtle differences.
You can't make it better, but it can always be worse. And in this situation, I feel like it's worse. So yes, he's worse than David Parker Ray. And what did we give David Parker Ray? A 7?
I think we gave him an 8.
I think I said 7 and 8 if he did kill more people.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna give him an 8.
Yeah, Gary is a solid 8.5 for me. I really struggled researching him, and I was so glad when you sent me your notes because I was like, I can't type anymore on this dude.
So I actually didn't go into as much detail as what was available. It was really hard because the girls are still alive. The girls have interviews, and they to go into great lengths to describe what was done to them. And as a woman, it's just...
Yeah, if you want more of the gruesome details, if you just even go on YouTube and type in the information, you're going to get copious amounts of videos, of interviews, of all kinds of just shit that you don't really want to hear on this dude. It's
really hard. It well and truly is hard to... We love the psychology behind true crime. We love understanding how the brain functions and dysfunctions, and things like this are interesting, but also they're still real humans that are really losing their lives, that are really being tortured. You know, as a woman, like, it feels deeply personal to me.
Yeah, I agree with you. It feels... To me, this is worse than if he had just gone out, hunted a woman down, raped and killed her. To me, the act of torturing them and keeping them and pitting them against each other and doing such horrific psychological damage to them, it's worse.
Killing them is terrible. Raping and killing them is horrible, horrible, horrible. But torture, rape, and kill, ooh, it's like whenever we get to the BTK killer... That one's fucking hard.
Yeah, we're not going to be covering him for a good while, though.
No, yeah. So, I think for now, we should do a palate cleanser because we deserve it.
Good God.
Palate cleanser. This is the palate cleanser. Palate cleanser. Do you have funny memes for us?
Of course I do.
Okay, give us some memes. Get this nastiness out of my brain for a few seconds.
I don't know if we've done this one or not, but we're going to roll with it anyway. It says, I picked up a hitchhiker last night. He seemed surprised that I'd pick up a stranger and asked, thanks, but why would you pick me up? And how do you know I'm not a serial killer? I told him the chances of 2 serial killers being in one car would be astronomical.
That's great.
Oh, man.
I really like that one. Fuck.
Let's see. Hey, Ted, what's the difference between a pickpocket and a peeping Tom? What? A pickpocket snatches watches.
Oh, God.
Oh, man. What's the difference between onions and women?
What?
I cry when I cut an onion.
Oh my god.
Oh, let me see if there's any Buffalo Bill memes. I'm sure there are.
Oh my god, there's gonna be so many Buffalo Bill memes.
Let's look.
So
Oh, look
many
at all of these.
lotion on the skin jokes.
I don't always put on a smiley face, but when I do, it's someone else's. If you're easily offended, I'm sure I have some thicker skin in the back. Feeling cute. Might put you in a hole and tell you to put the lotion on the skin later. I don't know. Oh my god.
Those are great.
I'm not as creepy and perverted as you think. I'm actually worse. But I don't have a dry well in my basement, so you're safe.
It's a picture of Jeffrey Dahmer looking sad, and then a picture on top of it saying no picnicking in the cemetery.
Oh man. This one is a picture of Buffalo Bill looking over the edge of the pit, and it says, "Love the skin you're in."
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 9.
Yeah, baby.
Holy crap, episode 9 of The Killer Tea. If you could do us a gigantic favor, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review to tell us how much you absolutely just adore our podcast.
You can also be super sweet and leave us a review on Facebook, which does help us get more audience, more traffic.
Makes us feel special.
And we can respond to you there, and we would super love to thank you for all your love or tell you you're a twat waffle for hating on us.
Yes, come get the sass. Fuck you.
But you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at The Killer Tea, and you can also email us at thekillertea@gmail.com.
How frequently do you check the email?
It's on my phone, so I get a email anytime we get an email. Well, no, that doesn't make sense. I get a notification anytime we get an email.
I get an email every time we get an email. That sounds infuriating. Not gonna lie.
I meant a notification. But we don't get emails all that frequently, so, you know.
This is how you have a bad time.
It's fine. It's mostly my Instagram planner being like, hey, it's time to post.
All right, y'all. Until next time.
Bye.
Join us next week where we talk about the Blood Countess, Elizabeth Bathory.